Yeah, I've seen Rays, I haven't seen.
Khris was good, that's a standard.
That's a standard, okay.
You have to surpass that. You can't drop below that.
I've gotten beat on height, which is shallow victory.
To start.
I think that I had like an overactive imagination as a kid, like probably most of the employees at DOUBLPINE, or in the video game industry as a whole. I'm trying to like go back to my farthest memory. My dad was really into like gadgets and technology, so we had Pong. We had a Pong machine at my house. So basically from like the get-go, I'm sure I had my hands on, like Pong was the one that had the 2 dials on the machine, and you would play Pong. So we had one of those, then we had an INTELLIVISION, he got one of those. I had a birthday party when I was a kid where he made like fake money for all my friends, and we bet on the horse racing game. That was like a really like strong memory, so it's probably like some of that. Then we got a Nintendo when I was in 2nd grade, and it was like brand new. I remember I was like running back to class, and I was like, Troy, I got robbed, I got robbed. And like everybody was like, you got robbed? That's amazing. And I was like, no, I got a Nintendo. And they were like, whoa, that's like, they didn't have as much of an interest because it was like brand new. They're like, well, robbed is a lot cooler than Rob. And I was like, no, it's not, trust me, it's a robot, plays with tops. But that was probably a big start. I mean, like, and then from that point on, I was like really dedicated to video games. Like, I had loyalties to video games. Like, I had a Genesis. I eventually got a Genesis, and then Super Nintendo came out. And I remember we used to go to this place called the Wizardrome for pretty much every one of my friends' birthdays, and it was this little shop in some mall in the middle of California where you could play all the video games for like all the systems, or what we thought was all the video games for all the systems. But like they had these little round tables with TVs on them with 7 Genesises and 7 Super Nintendos and 7, like they had 1 Neo Geo that was up on a big screen, because Neo Geo was like this like super system from NASA. But I remember going to one of the birthday parties and being like, Super Nintendo, that's a weak system. Like, I hate Super Nintendo. Sega Genesis is like the best. And then like I played F-Zero and I was like, forget Genesis. Like Super Nintendo is amazing. So I had these loyalties, but like I definitely like switched camps constantly. I remember like PlayStation discs, like Nintendo's way better. Then like I got a Nintendo 64. I got a Nintendo 64, I think for my birthday. And I remember I didn't have a PlayStation 1 at the time. And I remember going with my friends like 2 days later to Toys R Us to go buy a PlayStation, because we were like, Nintendo 64, this is awesome. Games have gotten crazy all of a sudden. That was like in high school, so like there was probably like a gap of a couple years where I wasn't playing a lot of games. But yeah, then we went to PlayStation, and I think that was a turning point for me, was the Nintendo 64, PlayStation. That was when I got back into video games. I was like a freshman in high school, and like then it was like nerd town for like the next 4 years, where I was like going to the import store, and like I would do that PlayStation trick where you would put like the stick and you'd listen to it and you'd switch out the disc so you could play the Japanese games. And like I got into anime and all that stuff. I don't even think we called it anime back then. It had a different name, but now it's called anime. Yeah, that's what we called it. I didn't know that was PC enough to say, but I was like, anime, that's such a weird, I hate that guy because he calls it anime. It's called Japanimation, man. Like, it was like, why I cared about stuff like that, I have no idea. Got into Chinese movies, like watched so many like Hong Kong action films. Even like Chinese dramas were blowing my mind. Like, I was just super stoked on like everything that was coming out of Asia through high school, and a lot of video games were coming out of Asia post 1990. Like the 90s, there was just so many games for PlayStation 1. So that was probably like a big influence. Like, I would say it would be a big influence as to why I make video games now, but it's like, I remember, like from like a kid, it's like, I think most of us game developers here, it's like, you probably could have been like, yeah, that guy's gonna make video games eventually. Like, that's pretty much all he thinks about. Like, so I don't know of any like turning point as a kid that got me into making the career choice of I'm gonna go to college and learn how to do art and make video games. I was super spoiled as a kid, like totally spoiled. My dad collects Lionel trains. like a maniac. Like he has, I think all of them, like everyone ever made. I mean, like there's a lot of people that collect these Lionel trains. It's crazy. But so my dad grew up wanting every Lionel train. Like as a kid, he wanted all the trains. And like it was 1950, like late 40s, 1950s. And so he's like, he would see all these like window displays of these amazing trains, which Lionel trains probably were like the video games of their era. And like he would see all these like window displays, like in that movie, what's it called, The Christmas Story, like where they're all gazing in the window. And he would want all that stuff, but it was the 1950s and 40s, and like nobody had any money back then. I'm pretty sure it was like, I know everybody seemed happy on the Donna Reed show, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot of like broke people back then. But anyway, so he never got any of those toys. Like he didn't get all of them. So when he grew up, I'm pretty sure, I've never talked to him about it, I'm pretty sure he was like, so when I have a kid, I'm gonna buy him every toy ever. And like it just so happened that like he bought me all the G.I. Joes and everything, and I had all those. But then, and I broke them all. Like, I was spoiled, but I was like, sure, you can come over to my house and set fire to all my toys. Like, that's okay. Like, I'm not gonna be like, these are my preciouses. I was like, let's blow them all up and like, let's melt everything. Like, I was pretty fun with my toys. I was liberal with sharing, because I had everything. There's Elliot always teases me because I revealed that I did have the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier when I was a kid. I had that. I had the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier. I mean, that was a point as a kid where I was like, dude, Dad, we need to slow down. Like, this is not right. This doesn't turn someone into a good adult. If you get them the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, they shouldn't have this. But so like when Nintendo came out, my dad saw that on the TV. And like I said, he liked gadgets and electronics and stuff like that. So when he saw Nintendo, he was like, I could see, his eyes were the size of saucers. He was probably more amazed by Nintendo than I was. I was just like a kid, like, banging the controller around. I remember my grandpa was there when we bought it too, my mom's grandpa, and like he saw Duck Hunt and he was just like, to me, my grandpa was this like really stoic, quiet man, like very, like he was just very stoic. And like, I remember my parents just talking about like his reaction to Duck Hunt. And like, I remember watching him just like, this is amazing. Cause it was like something he could relate to. He was like, oh, I understand what video games are finally. Because I was born in like 1910. Yeah, my dad was like really casual about buying games. Like they were expensive. So I mean, like I do remember one time at Toys R Us, I went to go buy Whip Rush. I think that was the game I wanted. It might not have been Whip Rush. I think I was going for a game. Might have been Whip Rush. I can't remember. Anyways, I was going for a game, Toys R Us. I was allowed to buy one game, and eventually my choices were like, should I get Whip Rush or should I get Hellfire? And Whip Rush, Hellfire, Whip Rush, and I was like, Whip Rush looks really cool, but Hellfire says hell in it, like, and fire, like, So I eventually got Hellfire, and like, my dad was like, are you sure? Because I know this isn't the game that you wanted to get when you came here. You might not like it, are you sure? And so like, I was like, no, I'm fine, I'll get the Hellfire. And I got it, and I was like, this is the worst game, because it was like mind-numbingly hard. It was such a hard game. The irony is that I ended up playing Hellfire for the next like 4 years. I don't think I ever beat it, but like I played it forever because it was so hard, even though I hated it. It's like, it's burnt in my brain. Like Hellfire is like a part of who I am. It's a small part, but it's like I'd always like, sometimes like I'll bang my foot on a door and I'll be like, fuck Hellfire. Like it's like that same, so there's something kind of interesting about that really hard video game that I'm just kind of realizing that like there's some long-term value to a really hard video game. But yeah, so there were instances where I wasn't like able to get every video game, but he was pretty good about getting me. He would go out of his way to get video games. Like Super Star Wars, he pulled that shit that was in Christmas Story, and I think it was like, it was great for me as a kid, but like I think it was like for him, he was like, this was my dream, like I'm gonna give my kid this amazing Lionel train engine that he wants, the Santa Fe, like unit number 76, like, and like we did the Christmas where we're opening up everything, and he's like, did you get everything you wanted? And I was like, yeah, I got everything. And then he was like, oh, what's that? And then I was like, what? And like instantly as a kid, like I'm like, Dad, like I'm your son, I know who you are, like I fucking know it's Super Star Wars up there, like, but I was like, oh, what is it? And like we opened a Super Star Wars, and I was like, that's great. Face palm, and like ran into my bedroom and played Super Star Wars. had the best 2 weeks ever after that. But yeah, I would get so many games from him, and that's got to be like a huge. And he was interested in all that stuff too. Like I remember, there's like I remember being really excited in Final Fantasy. Like after every like Christmas that I would get games, I'd always be like, Dad, come here and look at this. Look at this game. Look at this. I remember Final Fantasy II. I don't know why. Like I guess obviously it was pretty impressive at the time, but in Final Fantasy II. There's these little clocks on the wall and they have the ticking, whatever those things are called in clocks. See, with video games, I'm pretty decent at video games, but I don't even know what a clock is called. So they do numb the brain, it turns out. But that has one of those ticking things. I was like, Dad, look at that. They're actually moving. Like, that's amazing. Like, this game is taking it to a whole new level. It has moving things on a wall. Like, that's so amazing. I was so excited about that. And like, I think that like that interest, you know, like all like the magic that could be the games, that's what drives a lot of us game developers. I think that's what really drove me as an artist was like, you know, you see something that somebody does and you're like, instead of just enjoying it like a happy person would, you overanalyze it and you think about like all these things that you love about it, and then you're like, I wish I could make that plus. Like imagine, you know, like that plus all this other stuff. And so like that's kind of what I think pushes us game developers, and like that is probably like, you know, that, you know, like those are the things you could look out for if you're like, is my kid gonna, you know, grow up to make video games? Like, is if he's like, look at this game, and then like kind of like not having that much, like having a great time with it, but also like, look at how much better it could be if it's like this. My dad was really liberal about all the games that I would get. And he would, like, I think for Super Star Wars, I think he drove to like LA to find it. Like he would go, because he was a collector of Lionel trains, so he'd go, you know, he'd go to Arizona to be like, oh, Storm Shadow, there's a, you know, like somebody has a Storm Shadow G.I. Joe toy, I'm gonna drive all the way out there to go get it. Because I'm gonna spoil the hell out of my kid, because I've always wanted all the Lionel trains, so.
Were you an only child?
Yeah, thank God, because I think if I had other brothers, I don't think I'd get any less toys. I just think we would have been really poor. Like, I think that it would have just broke my dad. He'd be like, I have 7 kids. I have to buy every My Little Pony because 2 of them are girls, as well as every other, I don't know. I have, like, now I have all these kids. I got to buy every toy, like every genre. So yeah, we would have been poor, very poor. And my mom was like, she would just roll her eyes at the whole thing. Like, she was happy because sees this kid prancing around like a unicorn, throwing his toys in the air, like so happy. She's like, I guess we're doing good. He's super happy. He doesn't scream and yell. And it's like, I don't scream and yell because you just gave me everything I wanted. Like, I wasn't like, I want that. People are like, your kid's really, he's a good kid. And they're like, no, he's not. He just gets everything he wants, so he never complains. Terrible.
Did your dad ever actually play anything? Or did you just like watch you?
He never really played too much. He would pick up the controller if I forced him to, but he mostly just watched. I think that like he appreciates games. Like, I mean, he knows a lot about video games, but he never really plays them. Like, you know, like he's always telling me about. I hear about news in the video game industry from him. He's like, oh, I read this, I read that. Did you see this? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm a space cadet. All I'm thinking about is what toy I'm going to get next as a 30-year-old.
When you went to school, you went for animation. Were you going for a gaming career or just a career in animation?
I think a career in like 3D at that point. Like in high school, I was not a very good student. I don't really deal with authority very well. And like in high school, there's a lot of authority. And I just basically like shut off in high school. I didn't go to classes very often. Like I was brain dead in high school, and like I even got to a point where I was like, I don't even know what I'm gonna do. Like I was like, I have no idea. I remember at one point I told my parents, I don't need to go to college because Homer Simpson didn't go to college and they're doing pretty good. And they were like, oh my God, my son is not only is he like relating to a television series, but it's a cartoon. Like he's seeing a cartoon and being like, well, the cartoon is fine. Like I'll be okay.
So you want me to go to college?
College? Ha! Barber or clown?
Bart!
And like I was basically dead in the water. And like I thought my parents were like, they must have been like God knows what our son is gonna do. Like no idea. I eventually we got a new computer art program at the school. We got a bunch of Mac computers, and we got copies of Bryce, KPT Bryce, and that was like, I did that, and that was something that like instantly, like my brain clicked. I feel like a lot of artists like will have like, you know, natural inclination to do like a certain thing. Like you'll see, like I'm pretty sure when Raz picked up a pencil for the first time, he was like drawing amazing drawings. And on top of that, he just kept at it. And like, I'm not saying I did amazing 3D things. They were pretty crappy. They were like landscapes, but to me, they were totally awesome. And they weren't like a render. Like kids were like, it's a sphere. Look, I did create and did sphere, and then I put a chrome thing on it, and it was floating. Like I was doing these little like landscapes. Yeah. So once I did that, I was like, maybe I'm not going to be a total loser. Like maybe I can do this. And so then I just started focusing on art. I started taking tons of art classes in school and like really kind of giving a crap about it. Like I took a portfolio class with a friend of mine that was in LA, and we were driving to LA, I think every Saturday to do this like 8-hour portfolio class where we do like the stuff you do in college, like life drawing, which was like mind-blowing to us. We were like, this is crazy. And so like I really started focusing on that, and then I went to the Academy of Art to look at like the school, and like they did their like dog and pony show for like everyone, and they're like, these are our SGI computers, and SGI computers like back then were like these NASA computers, and we were like, I was like, they're amazing, like this is so cool. And so I you know, jumped onto that ship, and then during my time at the Academy, I kind of like, I focused on animation because back then like I was looking at 3D, and like people were doing lighting pretty well, people were modeling pretty well, but animation was like awful. Like you'd watch these like really awesome modeled, like people were doing these crazy patch modeling, all this stuff, but then you'd see them moving and they were like just awful. Like 3D movement was terrible back then. And so I figured, I was like, well, it must be the hardest thing. And if it's the hardest thing, then, and I'm competitive because I've grown up playing video games, so I have this natural, like, if it's really hard, it's gonna be something you're gonna like forever, like Hellfire. So I was like, I'll do animation. I don't know if there was like a natural like thing that worked or not. Maybe I'm kind of animated as a person, so there's probably some, like I was also probably kind of decent at it, but I saw potential for it. I saw how crappy it was. I saw how it could be better, so I just kept focusing on animation. And like during my time at the Academy of Art, I definitely like veered into like wanting to do film, like wanting to go to Pixar or Disney and doing film stuff. And even to the point after where I graduated, I got really lucky. A friend of mine had a job at Sony, and there was a portfolio class, and I was putting together a portfolio for that, my reel and like resume and everything. And at the end of the class, instead of turning in my assignment, my friend was like, you should just give me your portfolio and I'll take it in and see if we can get your job at Sony. So I just bailed on that and gave my portfolio in my class. I told my teacher, I was like, I want to give it up, I don't want to turn it in. And he was like, okay, well, if you get the job, you pass. If you don't, then get it back or you fail. And like get your portfolio back and bring it to me. And so I was like, fine. So I gave it to him, got the job. It worked out in my favor. I was so nervous. I remember not filling out the salary, like the requested salary, because I was like, I don't know what to put here. Like, I have no idea. And I didn't fill it out, and I remember like that night being like, you idiot, you forgot. You were like, I was gonna go back to it and then refill it out, but then like, I totally forgot because I was like, I'm done, I'm an idiot, I didn't pass high school. I remember being so like, oh my God, you idiot, they're gonna give you like $1 an hour. And then they called me and they offered me like way more than I would have put down. So that totally worked out in my favor. That was awesome. Although I did think like, what if I put like even more than that? Would they have just given it to me? Ugh.
What was the studio you were working at when you went to Sony?
Sony was, so I was at, that was at Redwood, kind of over where EA is. Sony has like a SCEA headquarters or something like that. I was 20 something at the time, so like I had no idea like how businesses worked or anything. So I was like, I guess I work at Sony's headquarters of some type. I don't even like, so they had like their computer headquarters there, and there was they had a small team inside the building, and that was crazy. Like that was a crazy first job because we all had offices because it was a business, like, you know, it's Sony. So I'm like this 20-year-old kid working in an office. I was like, I'm such a big shot, big boy Dave. So that was working for SCEA on a game called Rise to Honor. It was like a Jet Li fighting game. It was like what you do with that game is like it was like analog sticks were big because it's DualShock 2, PlayStation 2 era, and you would fight with the analog stick. You would punch in different directions, so you'd be punching, and we did all these animations where like the characters doing kung fu, and like we had, I think Corey Yoon or Yun Wu-ping was doing the choreography for it. Jet Li was doing the game. It was really cool. I got a copy of it with Jet Li's signature on it, and it's kind of neat. Especially since, like I was saying, I was watching all those Chinese Hong Kong action movies, so I saw all the movies that these guys had made earlier. But that was a really cool game. This guy, Alvin, was the producer on the game, and I think, it was my first game, and I didn't really know like the whole creative process. I think that he was like a big part of trying to make the game. The goal for the company, like the group, was to make a game like a DVD, like to make a Hong Kong action film. And it was also really cool because it was like half of the game took place in San Francisco, and this guy Francois made this 3D model of the Metreon, which is like a big building that they just put up downtown San Francisco back then, and it was like accurate to the electrical sockets. Like it was insane. It was so amazing. He made a complete like 2-scale level that was this mall. So that was really cool. Like you play Tony Hawk and you're like, it takes place in San Francisco, and you're like, there's no volcanoes in San Francisco. But this was like a real accurate interpretation of what San Francisco was like, and that was really cool. And the background art was awesome in that game for the time. It was really cool. It was a really neat first project to work on. Like I worked with like I said, I got one of my friends a job there. He's a really close friend of me. We ended up working like side by side for the next 8 years. And this other kid got a job there, Tristan, and we sat side by side for 6 years. It was really cool because it was this like first intro, like, we worked on Rise on it together. We all ended up leaving Sony at the same time. We ended up, like, Tristan got a job at this company called NIHILISTIC after we finished Rise to Honor. There's a company that made Vampire the Masquerade, that was kind of like their coming out game, and or their launch title or whatever. PC game. Yeah, and it got good accolades. Like people seemed to really like it. So I called Tristan and I was like, they were working on StarCraft Ghost, which was like, oh, they're working on StarCraft Ghost. That's that mystery game that everyone's like, they're making some type of action StarCraft game. This is going to be crazy. I went in. They were like, yeah, we're going to do, like in StarCraft, they have that like talking head thing. We're going to contract hire me to work on the talking head animations. The game had like, I think, a few months left in production. And then they hired me, and I was going to start in 2 weeks. And the day that I started, they canceled the game. Blizzard was like, we're done. We're not going to make this game. Like, so I didn't even really get to see StarCraft Ghost at the time, which is kind of a bummer because like they basically like took all their stuff and left. So it wasn't until like 2 years later that I finally got to play StarCraft Ghost, play a build of StarCraft Ghost. They also were already lining up some work with EA to do a Marvel fighting game, like this like 3D fight game. And so instead of us just going our separate ways, I just came on to work on the Marvel fighting game, and that was an interesting game.
One that's kind of like Power Stone.
Yeah, it is like Power Stone. Jesus, I haven't thought about that game in a long time. But yeah, it's kind of like that, only just as good. We did some cool, like, I think that what was kind of interesting about that game is I think that me and Tristan and Leo had a lot of fun animating that game, and we kind of, NIHILISTIC was a studio where they really were like, when animation was like, this is not working for us, we need to do this, the animations are going to be cooler if we do this. They would just like be like, okay, and they'd build this like crazy ass tool for it. And so we had this like freedom there to do animation kind of however we saw fit. Whatever helped animation was like a priority. So we were able to do some pretty cool things for 3 total idiots that like had no idea what we were doing. I mean, keep in mind, me, Tristan, and Leo, we all got our first jobs at Rise to Honor like 2 years ago, and now we're making a game all by ourselves. So we were just kind of having fun, and we had some like guidance from EA, but most of it we were just like, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? We ended up doing a pretty good job with the animation on that game, I think. And the next thing we worked on was a Conan fighting game. It was basically THQ came to Nihilistic and was like, we want to make God of War. Can you make God of War? And there were some other options, and I was I was really stoked. I read all those books, the Robert Howard books. Like I was into Conan, and I was like totally down. I like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan. I like all the different types. We ended up doing this Conan for the Xbox 360 game that was a clone of God of War, which also wasn't very enticing. You're like, okay, you want us to make a clone, but so I ended up being the lead animator on that, or combat designer. And that was like my first real switch to game design. Instead of like, we were supposed to rip off God of War, but we decided not to totally rip it off. And some game, like we ended up doing a pretty decent job. There's a lot of arms getting cut off and like jibbing, I guess we call it. I don't know if that's a real word, but that was the language that we used. Like lots of jibs, arms getting cut off constantly. A lot of the attacks, we like continue on our tradition of like, this is going to make the animations work better if we build these tools. So we had these really cool tools to help implement animation. I was able to do, I think, I did most of the combat animation. That was like mostly what I focused on. And like, I think there was something like 350 different attacks in the game. Mm-hmm. You would like pick up sword and shield, or drop the shield and pick up 2 weapons, pick up a 2-handed sword. Like you switch, you throw them all, pick up guys, throw them. Like there was this cool stuff that we were doing. Like at the time it wasn't really done, but like where I was doing like freeform attacks, but then in the middle of the combo, we would do like a grapple where now we would be synced up, and I would like stick the sword inside of you, and then I'd kick you off, and now I'd have 1 sword and my combo would change. And then like if I finished out 1 combo, I'd pull the sword back out and end up with 2, or like I'd leave that one in and now I'd have a shield. Like there was some really cool things that we did, and like I was pretty happy with the way that game turned out. I remember once telling somebody at that company that was pretty invested in the company, I was like, I'm hoping we get a 7.5 on GameSpot. This was like back when GameSpot was like the spot for game reviews. Like it really made it, like it was, whatever they said a game was, it was authentic, good, solid review. And I remember being like, I'm kind of hoping we get like a 7.5 on GameSpot. And like, I remember his eyes were like, what? Like that concept to him was like, you're shooting for a C, like down the middle of the road. But back then 7.5 meant like, you guys got something. Like, keep up the good work, and you're gonna make 9.0s. Like, it was a good start. And like, that's where we were as artists in the video games, in the realm. Like me, Tristan, Leo, like the studio, we were like really kind of up and coming as, game developers. And we got a 7.5 on GameSpot. Like, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. 7.5 straight on the dot. Like, that was really cool. So that game's, it's okay. I remember there was a guy, I think he was a combat designer on Dante's Inferno or something like that, but he had a blog and he reviewed God of War, Devil May Cry, and Conan. And like, I was just stoked to be in that, like, that somebody was like, put me into that same group. Like, just the fact that I was involved, like somebody mentioned the Conan combat next to those 2 amazing games. I was like, that's great for me, I'm happy. And he was like, he gave like a really good, accurate depiction of, or like review of the combat. And like, I was like, that's fine with me. Like, that's pretty much, how I felt about it too. So that was really cool. So that was a fun project to work on. It was my first sort of being able to make design decisions about combat and stuff like that, and like start talking to designers and be like, hey, this level will be better if it's like this here, and these guys come in and do this, so I can do this, and it'll make the combat more fun. I'm like starting to integrate with designers and stuff like that, and kind of gave me some insight. Eventually, I did more design work because it's really fun, and I have an interest in it. But that was like the first time that like I was like put into a position where I could see the fun about design and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a fun project. From there, I think after Conan, I was working on a DLC game at Nihilistic, zombie apocalypse game, like basically Smash TV with zombies. But in the middle of that project, a really good friend of mine, Elliot, who I've been friends with since college, he was like, we're hiring at Double Fine. Like, I know you want to get a job at Double Fine. And it's like, obviously, I work in the video game industry. I want to get a job at Double Fine. Like, that's a no-brainer. Like, Double Fine was this, like, it was like this awesome studio. Like, keep in mind, I just animated a game about cutting people's heads off and fighting and like killing and killing and killing. And like, I'm pretty sure I'm a funnier guy than I am a violent guy. So I was always like, why am I like, that's one of the things that was kind of bumming me out about video games. Is like, I just did a Hong Kong kung fu action film where there's a lot of killing. I just did a Marvel fighting game where there's a lot of fighting. Just did a Conan game where there's a lot of dismemberment. Like, it's violence, violence, violence. And like, I would be like, dude, you're not a violent person. Like, you're definitely funnier than you are violent. So obviously I would want to get a job at Double Fine. And so I got my stuff together as quickly as possible, and I sent it over to Elliot. And then like later that day, he sent me the thread from the animators looking at my reel, because that's the way, you think you're being secretly, you're talking about someone, but everybody, like, there's no secrets. So he sends me this thread, and the thread is like, hey, his work is pretty good. Oh, cool, he's done gameplay stuff. That's what we need for Brutal Legend, because Brutal Legend is a fighting game. I'm on the road to do more violence, but it's a start. It's funny violence, not like yeah. So he looks pretty good. You do gameplay, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we should bring him for an interview. Wait a minute. Is his email nerd.starwars? Are we sure we want to bring this guy in? Da-da-da-da-da. Let's just bring him anyways. And like, I was like, my email, blah. May have almost prevented me from getting a job at Double Fine. I don't think so. I think it kind of sealed the deal, even though they pretended that it was pretty nerdy. They brought me in for an interview, and it worked out all right. Nailed it. I think I bugged Tim a lot in that interview. Like, I was like, dude, this is awesome. I'm meeting Tim. I remember, I was like, can I see Brutal Legend? This is pretty funny. I've never told anybody this. I was like, can I see Brutal Legend? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. I forgot that I like vaguely mentioned that maybe you could see the game Strange Person, who I have like whatever. And so we go into his office, and I play Brutal Legend, and like, I'm a talkative guy. I'm inquisitive. And so I kept asking him about all this stuff. And then me and Elliot went to lunch after the interview, and he was like, dude, that interview seemed like it went really well. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, nobody has spent that much time with Tim on an interview. And I was like, in my head, I was like, well, little does Elliot know that like, I only spent that much time with Tim because I wouldn't let go. Like, I shut the door and was like, we're sitting in this room and talking for like an hour. It wasn't because he had any interest. He was probably like, get this fucking kid out of here. But I was like, oh yeah, he just wanted to show me, like, I totally played it up. Like, yeah, he wanted to show me the game, and like, really liked me. It was awesome. Yeah, so I had the interview. That seemed to work out all right. I came on for Brutal Legend and finished Brutal Legend. Didn't know if I was going to stay on at Double Fine, but it turns out this place is definitely will have your back, and like, this is a company where it's like, once you're in, we don't like to let go of our family. And so, yeah, I've been here ever since, and then now just switching around from different project to project, because there's just so many at Double Fine.
You got to work on that funny stuff that you were looking for?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the funny stuff is like, it's all over the place here. I mean, I think, like in Brutal Legend, I was doing combat game design or game animation. Mm-hmm. It was still a little bit of the violent stuff, but that's cool because I was ready for it because I'd done so much combat. I knew what things not. I animated 300 and something combat moves on Conan, so I knew which ones people were like, another spin move, really? Like I knew which ones people were sick of seeing, so I was able to do some really cool animations. There's some of my favorite combat animations that I've ever done are on Brutal Legend. And like, there's this one where this was really cool. It was the first reaction that I had from Tim, but it's one where when you attack from one direction to another, he throws his axe up in the air, and then he grabs it, and then he hits the guy with it on the as the axe is coming down. And that was really cool at the time because it's still video, Xbox is, combat stuff is still, now video games are crazy, but even back then there was like some things that were like, wow, that's really cool. He let go of his weapon. Like that's insane. Like games always is like the weapon was like fused in your hand. That was really cool. Tasha sent me an email that he sent her. It was like, whoa, why did he just threw his axe in the air? And it was totally awesome. And I was like, yes. It was like a week into the thing. I was like, I'm doing okay. That's so rad. But yeah, it was, like, it was violent still, but it was fun. It was a fucking crazy project to work on. My God, Brutal Legend was insane. Like, coming in and seeing Brutal Legend after seeing what I had seen and being like, this is amazing. Like, first of all, it looks fantastic. Like, the backgrounds are out of control. But on top of that, like, the thing I really liked about Brutal Legend as a gamer was the amount of like enemies and things that were in the game. It was like Castlevania. Like, I mean, I had just got done making lower budget games where it's like, we only have a certain amount of enemies. Like, we can only put, we can't make, an 8-armed tentacle enemy, and it can't not be a boss. We can't spend that much energy on a non-boss. Like, but in Brutal Legend, it was like every enemy was like totally different. It was like Castlevania, where there's just tons of enemies. So like, I wasn't working on the funny stuff yet, but I was working on really cool stuff. I was working on, like, when I was a kid, the Castlevanias, the, like, the Nintendo games, like these crazy games that, like, totally blew my mind. Ghosts and Goblins, like, I was working on that, like a 3D version of that. So that was really fun. I didn't do any cutscene work on Brutal Legend. I was just totally in the combat trenches. I wanted to do cutscene stuff, but, like, I had to do the combat stuff because I had the experience with it. And when that was over, the funny stuff really started kicking in. And the fun stuff, like that switching into design kicked in. That's when we were done with Brutal. We didn't know what we were going to do. We did the Amnesia Fortnite. But then I was going to work with Tasha on Costume Quest and do design on that game. And that was really fun because we were just like, let's just make a, Mother 3 game. Let's like, that's her favorite game. So like, let's just do that. And like, I was a Japanese gamer as a kid, so it's like, I get to make an RPG? Are you kidding? This is gonna be amazing. And like, it was, and we get to throw Double Fine art into it, and like, there was a lot of cool stuff with that. So during the previs of that, I was doing a lot of the design work, like figuring out how to do something really cool. Like, I really liked towards the end of the RPG era on the SNES, like, they were using Mode 7 in really cool ways, like cliff sides where you'd see the town below and the cliff would be up here, like almost 3D walkways and stuff like that. I thought that was really cool. So like, the level that I primarily worked on was the mall, and like doing the layered levels of the mall was like something that I was like, this is gonna be really neat. Like, if we put these bridges here, like by the time you're on the top one, it's gonna be really scary because like the party's on the first floor and you get up to the top, so it'll get scarier and harder as you go along. And like, I really wanted it to be like light, middle, pitch, like dark, but I mean, it still sort of had that feeling. Like, I was like, yeah, have the skylights, the rain, it'll be really scary. And then like, we'll do like, another thing I really liked in RPGs was like, there's always like the dark cave and like the light cave. So like, we started in the mall with like coming in through the back where they're rebuilding the mall, and like there's the dark cave, like where it's like these dark areas, and it's like, I mean, I know specifically that in my mind I was in the mist cave in Final Fantasy II, like where it's like the first cave, and like I was like, it's gonna be that first sort of cave feeling. It's like gotta be dark and scary and like rocky, and it was really fun to work on that like RPG-ish game. So that's when it started, and then that's when it started like having fun. I started doing, like in that one, after doing the design work I just did like all cutscene work. Like Elliot and I were both on that game. Elliot was doing more of the gameplay stuff, combat and stuff like that, and I was just, because he had done cutscenes and he hadn't done a lot of gameplay stuff, whereas I had done a lot of gameplay stuff and I wanted to do cutscenes, so I was doing cutscenes, and like I was going hog wild on that project. Like, there was no, like, it was like, animated cutscene, do whatever. Like, do whatever you want. No storyboards, like, barely any writing. Like, let's just do it. In this cutscene, I'm going to block off this area, so I'm going to have a kid crash a skateboard, and a car's going to crash, and, like, this is going to happen. Or, like, like, I basically, like, every cutscene was, like, straight ahead, just animated as, like, this will be funny if I just add this, and this will be funny if I just add this. at the moment. Like I wasn't planning anything, just animating straightforward. So that was like, that's where the fun, like the funny stuff got to really, I got to start playing with the funny stuff. So after Costume Quest, I think, then I was working as an animator just doing animation stuff like on, I think the next one I worked on was, I think I helped out Trench a little bit. Then I did some gameplay stuff. And then I went to stacking. And that was really cool because Lee was like, dude, just make it. I don't care. Let's just make a game. He was very like, let's just make stuff, just put it in. So then on that one, I just helped him out with animations and just did a bunch of cutscenes. And then after stacking, that's when I was like, I want to do more design work. So I basically like, I did this before. For Conan, I went to, like, I very like humbly was like, look, I'm not a designer. I want to interview for a design position. I want you to hire me as a designer. But I don't want a pay cut. I'm not that humble. So I did that for Conan. I didn't get hired, but kind of got hired. They're like, you can do combat design. I did the same thing with Ron. I think I told Tim, I was like, Tim, I want to, be interviewed for the design position. So he was like, well, just let Ron talk to you. So I went and talked to Ron. Ron gave me an interview for the design position on the cave. And it was the same end result where I guess it's not, people aren't too eager to hire somebody they already hired. Not the best strategy, but whatever. So Ron was like, you're not gonna fill the one design position. I still want to bring in a designer, which was great because we brought on JP and that was really cool. He was a fun guy to work with. But I still want you to be on the project. I still want you to be a designer on the project. So the three of us will work on the game together. So it worked out in my favor, or in the exact same favor, in the best possible way it could have worked out. I was on the design on that one full time, and like that was like pretty amazing because it's like I was like, okay, I'm about to go in from day one, like from inception, on the cave with Ron Gilbert. Like that's pretty amazing. Like that was awesome. Like I'm gonna go work with Ron Gilbert. That's crazy. So I went into that one. I was like, whatever Ron wants to do, I'll just be like, I'm just gonna facilitate his magic because he's obviously really magic. Like he's a magician with the game designs that he's done so far. And it turns out Ron's just like, he just like Tim, like he's like, let's get the creative fires going, and then if you have some crazy ass idea, cool, let's roll with it. So like we would do these awesome design meetings where like we're sitting in that back room and we would just be like, today we're gonna design this level. We would sit there and be like, okay, what about this happens and then this happens, and we start designing the story, and like we start thinking about like, it's my first sort of adventure game that I get to work on. I realized the value of story and all of the puzzles of an adventure games. Turns out, yeah, they're not dead adventure games, by the way. Jesus, there's like a million adventure games that just came out. That's pretty awesome. But anyways, that was my first adventure game. Working with Ron, learning about the story in adventure games, like coming up with crazy puzzles, trying to like come up with puzzles that push the story forward. They aren't just puzzles for puzzles' sake. Something that has an effect. Like we had this, like Ron had this like idea. He's like, I want the game to be really dark. So I was like, what if the game is constantly pushing you to do things that as a gamer you're like, I don't want to do that. But then at the end, you realize that you have to do those things to move forward. I was like, a gamer wants to go forward. They're like, give me a puzzle, I will solve it, I'll move into the next thing. I was like, if killing 1 million people is a result of solving that puzzle, most gamers will be like, kill the fucking people, just get me to the end of this game. That was just a really fun project to work with Ron, to work with somebody that like really helped shape my understanding of how you're okay to think of story first, do the story, figure out how to make the gameplay, usher the story along, and to not have the two things be separate. And like that's one of the things that it like really opened my eyes about like adventure games. So after that, I was like, I need to work on Broken Age. Like, I also like had just finished doing all the design, like all that design work. So like, I was like, I just want to do animation. I want to be told what to do. I don't want to think. I just want to get to work and just think about funny animation and like not have to worry about any like decisions. So Broken Age was a perfect place for that because they needed a ton of animation. And I think me and Ray have like a really similar appreciation for like the animation styles that we both like. Like we like similar things with animation. We get stoked on the same stuff. Like I'm also really competitive with Ray, and it turns out that Ray is really competitive with me. I didn't know that. I thought that was one of my recent discoveries that really made me happy because like Ray was doing this, like I just get done doing a shot and I'm like, this is looking awesome. Like I'm really happy. And then I look over at Ray and I'm like, fuck, he's killing it over there. Like that's amazing. And so I lean over and I'm like, let me see that animation. Like what is that? And then he shows it to me and I'm like, I remember I was like, dude, Ray, you're so awesome. Like I was like, I'm so stoked on your animation. Like, God, I was like, you're so rad. And he was like, he's like, well, that's how I feel about you. And I was like, really? And he's like, I was like, shut up. And he's like, no, I keep looking over at your computer. And I'm like, I gotta step it up. Like Dave, you know, like, so like there's this, it turns out that the competitive, like the non-violent competitive nature of our animation, like I keep seeing him and like I'm like, you know, I gotta, like I don't want everybody talking about Ray's animation, I want to talk about mine. And he's like, like I'm sure he's like, he won't ever admit it, but I'm sure he's like, I don't want him to look at my animation. Like we just love good animation. We love that, like, you know, we love it so that at the end it's like the shot that you see and you're like, that shot is amazing. So there's this cool, we work really well together. And on Broken Age, it's like, you know, Broken Age is a game where it's like, I don't care. I will cut the heads off of people because I am not a violent person. I will cut the heads off of people to make an amazing game. Like this is a game that's like a big deal for us. Like getting the Kickstarter the way that it went, like, you know, I don't know if all the backers really know this, but like the way that it went at Double Fine was like, we were like, we don't know how this is gonna go. And then when we saw everybody react the way that they did and the amount of people that were interested in like, go ahead and do what you want to do. When that happened, it was like, that was emotionally turning for all of us. We were like, holy crap, people give a shit about us. Like, we don't just imagine that they give a shit about us. Like, they actually do. They want us to make good games. And so it was like, the fact that people would make that investment and cared about us, I think for a lot of us here, we're like, this is a game that we can't fuck up on. Like, this is a game it has to be amazing. Like, I don't care what happens to us while we make this game. Like, it's gotta be amazing. Like, we can't let these people down. Like, they care about us. Like, they give a shit. And it's like, so I think that like all of us were like just so stoked about that like we're pushing ourselves in a way that is like exactly the way that I want to be pushed. I want not just Ray to look at my shots and be competing with Ray, but to be competing with myself constantly on this project so that in the end, people are like, this is fucking great. Like, you know, it's like there's Grim Fandango over there and like Full Throttle. It's like, these are amazing games and it's like, this is our opportunity to like bring that type of love and like long-term appreciation that fans of those games have and the like current like appreciation that people have. Like this, it's just like this weird opportunity. It's really weird. It's like this is like World War II. It's like, it means something. I don't know if World War II meant something. I don't know what that metaphor is for. But the point is it's like, this is our Independence Day. Like this, it's like, this is a big deal. Like we give a shit. We really want to stop all these aliens from killing everybody, and the only way to do it is by making a weird adventure game. I don't know. I'm terrible at metaphors apparently. Like I have no idea how to make a good metaphor. We really care. Like it's like, so I don't even know what question I was at. Like I just got so stoked thinking about how stoked I am on Broken Age. But I think originally you asked me if working with Ray and integrating on other projects. Basically, the short answer to that is working with Ray is great because I push myself, but then this project is one where it's like, if you think about not pushing yourself for just like a second, you start feeling really guilty and like crappy, so you start pushing yourself even more. And it's like the perfect project to work on because it's like, when it's all said and done, it's like that's the type of project you really want to work on. If it was really, you know, if you were pushing yourself really hard and it's fatigue, you know, it's like a lot of fatigue. A year after you ship that game, the fatigue is gone, but the game is still there. And it's like, that's what you get to look back on and be like, look, it was worth it. Like, I don't remember how tired I was working on that game. Like, all I remember is that like, people are stoked on it. Like, there's a couple people out there that like, were like, look, the clock's you know, they tick on the wall in this game. It's totally amazing. It's all about like that. It's all about those little moments. Trying to push to get all that stuff in there, and this is the perfect game for that.